Hey guys, welcome back to the Honda Resource. In this episode, I'm replacing the front left wheel bearing on a 2007 Honda Accord. This particular car is a 4-cylinder version, and this process should be similar almost 2003 to 2007 Honda Accords and Acura TL, regardless if it's 4-cylinder or V6. There are some slight variations on bearing size and that kind of stuff, but the process is relatively the same. In this episode, I'll show you the tools and I'll give you the know-how so that you can do this yourself. Alright, so this is most of the tools that I'm going to be using for this job. So here we have a 1/2-inch impact. You can do this without an impact, but it's a little more difficult. It's really nice to have an impact. And I have a 17mm 1/2-inch drive socket. I have a 32mm socket. So the 17 we'll use for like the lower ball joint and the tie rod end. We'll use 32 for the axle socket or axle nut. I have a 3/8 stubby impact here with a 12mm, like to remove the brake caliper, and a 10mm to remove like the brake line, the ABS line, that kind of stuff. And then we have a 12mm wrench, 14mm wrench, 17mm wrench. We have a pair of cutoff pliers to remove cotter pins. We have a pair of snap ring pliers to remove the snap ring from the hub. We have a flathead screwdriver. Sometimes you need it to pop the snap ring out. I have just a chisel, and this is like a brass punch, and I use this getting the axles out if it's stuck in the hub. I'll show you that in the video too. And then I have a little 2-pound sledgehammer. So I think this is most of the tools that we'll be using for this job. This is the one that I'm going to be replacing, but you can sit here and you can hear that wheel bearing. So what I'm going to do is take my 19mm socket and I'm going to pop off these 5 lug nuts, and we'll get this wheel off here real quick. Alright, so now I've got the wheel off. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take 12mm and we're going to pop the 2 bolts off here that hold on the brake caliper to the brake caliper bracket. Alright, so now I've got those 2 bolts out, so I'm going to pop these 2 10mm here off, and then I'll be able to take my brake caliper and just lay it up here and get it out of the way for a few minutes. Alright, so now I've got those out, and I got the 2 on here off, so all we gotta do is grab this caliper, just slide it off, just set it over there out of the way. If you don't have something like that, set it, you can zip tie it up, do something. Just don't let it hang on this rubber line because it's not really good for the rubber line. So now we're gonna take the brake caliper bracket off. We're gonna take off the upper ball joint. We gotta take off the ABS wire here. We gotta take off the outer tie rod end and lower ball joint and the axle. So to start off with this outer tie rod end, we're gonna need some kind of pliers to get this cotter pin out. And then this one is a 17mm. I'll be able to pull that one down. Now the way I do it is I just loosen the nut, not quite all the way off, and then I just take I got a little 2-pound hammer, and I'll just hit right here on this and it'll pop it out. And the reason I say don't take the nut off all the way is because if you miss and you hit these threads, you'll mess the threads up. But if you miss and hit it with a nut on there, you'll just hit the nut and don't really hurt the threads. So I recommend not taking the nut all the way off. So I'm gonna grab some tools real quick and get this kind of off. Alright, so I got that cotter pin out and I got the nut loose. You can see I've got a pretty good gap in here. It's not all the way off, but it's still on there some. So if I was to slip and hit off of the actual ball joint here, or off the knuckle here, and slip and hit here, it's not gonna mess up my threads. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get my hammer and I'm gonna hit right here and pop this right up. Alright, I'll try to capture this. I don't know how well this is gonna go since I'm holding it with one hand and hitting with this hammer with the other one. It's just a little 2-pound sledgehammer. Oh, saw it move in. See, it's loose. So now we can take the nut the rest of the way off, and bang, there it is. So now I'm going to take this ABS wire off. It's just a couple 10mm nut or bolt here, and it's just the one here, and then it should be the one right back here. So can't really see it too well, but it's also a 10mm. Yeah, right there, the little guy. So it's 10mm there. 10mm there, and then you just take this and kind of twist it and wiggle it around, it'll come out, and that's just your ABS sensor. And then we'll take this wire and we'll just kind of lay it out over here out of the way. So I just took this ABS sensor out, and this one actually looks like it's toasted. The bracket was also broke off of it, and you can kind of see that's an old brake. But typically it's going to come out and look like this as a complete unit. It just has the one little bolt in it here. Alright, so now I'm going to get my 17mm, and I'm going to take off this bolt here, and there's another bolt here, and that's going to take off this caliper bracket, and they'll let me remove this brake rotor. Alright, as you can see, this is that caliper bracket, and these are the two bolts that hold it on. Alright, so now that I got that off, I can take this rotor off. Now typically they're going to have a panhead Phillips head screw here and here, and they're both M6 thread. They're not absolutely necessary, because once you put the wheel on there, it's going to hold the rotor in. That's more of just an assembly assistant. So this one, somebody hasn't put those back in whenever it was previously removed. If you can't get them out, they're Phillips head. A lot of times they like to strip. I've had to take a drill bit and maybe like a 3/8 to a 1/2 inch drill bit, and just kind of drill in the center of it until it pops the head of it off, and then you can remove the rotor. If you live up north or somewhere where it's salty and it has more rust, you can use a M8 bolt here and here, and it'll help you pull this rotor off. Here in the south, I mean, this is about the most rust you're going to see, and this is just really surface rust from where it's been sitting for a while. And like I said, this one doesn't have the little set screws in it, so I mean it's pretty much gonna slide right off. Okay, yeah, so I got the rotor off, and there's your hub assembly. But now we've got it down to here, so we're going to take this axle nut off, and this one's actually a 32mm. Some of the other cores, like the V6 models, are 36mm. This is a 4-cylinder version, and this is a 32mm. Alright, so axle nut coming right off. This axle's already loose, kind of. Sometimes they'll be kind of stuck in the hub here. Alright, so say if your axle is stuck, see how this one doesn't want to move? You can use like a brass punch, or if you have an old 1/2 inch drive extension. Don't take the nut all the way off, leave it on like this. You can put your punch there in the center, like that. Or like if I had this brass punch, put it here in the center and then hit this, and you can see that now my axle's freed up. So by leaving the nut on there, it keeps you from banging the outside and mushrooming it out. Just a little quick tip. This one came loose pretty easy, so we're good to go here. So now all I gotta do is remove this lower ball joint, and I'm gonna do it kind of the same way I did the tie rod in. I'm gonna loosen the nut here after I take this cotter pin out, and then I'm gonna hit it here. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm gonna hit it here with the hammer, and it'll pop it off. And I'm gonna do the same with the upper one here. I'm gonna take this nut off here, and then, or I'm not gonna take it off, I'm gonna loosen it to where it's down here, and then I'm gonna hit it here on the side of the spindle, and it'll pop it off. A lot of people like to use the ball joint forks. Those work, but I found this method works pretty good without touching the boots, so I don't like destroying these boots. Alright, so I don't know if this is the OEM nut or not up here, but that's a 14mm up here, and as you see I got it loose, not all the way off, but it's loose. And down here, this one is a 17mm, and you can see I've got it loose, but it's not all the way off. So now what I'm going to do is take my hammer, and I'm going to hit here like I said, and I'm going to hit here, and I'm going to pop both these off, and then I'll be able to remove this whole spindle. Alright, so I just gave this one a couple of licks, and you can see it's separated it. So now I can remove the rest of the nut, and then that one will be ready to come off. But now I've got to get this lower one loose, so we'll work on that one now. Alright, so as you can see, this one's loose now. Also, when removing this one down here, and I'm actually hitting it from the back side, so if I'm facing toward the front of the car, I'm hitting it here, but I'm holding the wheel spindle out like this, and I'm pushing up on it. That's just going to kind of give you a little extra, so whenever it pops loose, you'll know it, because it's going to pop right up. So now I've got both of these loose, so I'm just going to take them the rest of the way off. Boy, you can say toast. But yeah, so now we've got the whole spindle out. As you can see, this is kind of what it looks like. gonna leave your axle hanging here. That's where your lower ball joint goes. This is your upper ball joint. Tie rod in, ABS sensor, and of course our brake calipers over here. Yeah, so now we're gonna get this bad boy out of here. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna find a socket that'll fit right inside of this, and then we're gonna hit it with this hammer, and we're gonna knock this hub assembly here out. Alright, so here's the new hub assembly that they bought. I actually have the wheel bearing in the freezer. Now, I would recommend leaving it in the freezer for at least 12 hours before you're ready to tackle this project. But right now I'm gonna pop this apart real quick, and I'll show you what we're looking at here. Alright, so back to this. Alright, so I actually have my 32mm socket still sitting here, and it fits in there pretty good. It's got a little gap around it. That's fine. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold this up off the floor. You can choose to use some blocks or whatever to kind of prop it up. I feel pretty comfortable just being able to hold it myself. And then I'm going to hit the socket with my hammer, and it's going to knock the hub assembly back through. You can see here, one good lick, and it's already kind of got it moving. So a couple more licks, this is going to be all the way out. See, that's all your balls out of your bearing. Alright, so once you get it off, I've got it clamped in my vise here. Alright, so I've got my lock ring pliers, and we can kind of see there's one hole and there's the other hole. Alright, so we're going to get those in there eventually. Alright, and then so once you get them in there, you're going to squeeze it, and it's going to move that lock ring. Let me get this situated real quick. So upon further inspection, this wheel bearing is so bad, it's eating part of my eyelet here. Hopefully I still got enough to get it off. Alright, well, I ain't got it all the way out, but it's got it started coming out. So once you get to this point, you can kind of walk it out with a screwdriver or whatnot. But alright, so that's the little piece that was holding out. Piece of the old bearing. Alright, so back to our lock ring here. Took my screwdriver behind it and walked it out. It came right out. So now I can get behind, and I can actually push the rest of this bearing out from the back side, because that lock holding this outer race of the bearing here. I'm gonna get this outer race out and push it all the way out. So I'm gonna flip it over and get it down here back on the ground and get it situated, get it ready to get this part of the bearing out and this outer race here, and I'll get back to you. Alright, so I took my hammer and started knocking on the bearing that was left in here, and it kind of got it moving, because you can kind of see this gap that is created here, right in here. It's kind of a groove where it's made a gap. So this means it's moving, but in the process of that, it knocked the rest of that bearing out. So now what I'm going to do is I have just a regular old punch, and so I'll get in here kind of in that groove and work it around with my hammer hitting on this punch, and that's going to knock that the rest of the way out. I just kind of got this end of the spindle kind of propped up on something here. You can use a block of wood or whatever. Now I'm just going to get back in that groove here with my chisel. See? That's your outer race of both bearings. So you have a bearing that's on this side pretty much, and a bearing that's on this side. And this sucker here is wore slap out. So I would recommend cleaning this up real good. Well, you can see here that I've got it cleaned up. Appears someone has done something with the wheel bearing before, or either the wheel bearing failure messed up the little area here where the lock ring goes. So I had to take my little cut off wheel on the grinder You could probably do it with a Dremel or whatever, and I just cleaned it back out a little bit so that the lock ring fits down there properly. This new wheel bearing came with a new snap ring, and it does fit in there properly. I've already test fit it, make sure it works like it's supposed to. Like you said on the previous videos, I cleaned this up last night. I don't know what all this scoring and stuff in here is. I didn't do that. I'm just going to take a little sandpaper. This is actually some 800 grit. And just run in here just to make sure that new wheel bearing is going to slide in here real good. Nothing super aggressive, just making sure if it's got anything small in there that'll shine it back up. Sandpaper over that. Now I've got me some brake parts cleaner. Hose it off real quick and make sure I got all the dust and residue out of there. This stuff dries pretty rapidly, so then I'm gonna get my wheel bearing out here in a minute. I'm gonna put this back on the floor to where I can bump it in, because by putting the new wheel bearing in the freezer, it's gonna shrink it ever so slightly. And so with this being, you know, exterior temperature out here, I want to say it's probably about 70 degrees today. This is gonna be, you know, normal size, where the wheel bearing is slightly shrunk, so it's going to just slide right down in there. If it's a real cold day, you could take a little butane torch or something, and you can heat this up, and it'll help it. Should be pretty minimal effort to get the new wheel bearing in there. May take a couple small taps with my hammer. Spindle off my vise here and put it back in the floor real quick, and get a block of wood put under it, just to make sure I don't ding up my floor any worse than it already is. Alright, so here we have our wheel bearing fresh out of the freezer, and as you can see, it's pretty frothy. So on the ABS models, they say the brown seal has to go towards the ABS sensor, this magnetic ring. This should just pretty much slide down in this. Just get my hammer and bump it in there, but I think it's well on its way. Walk it around too, that way it goes in evenly, because if you try to do it on one side and you continue to do it on one side, it's going to get in there cockeyed and it's not going to seat right. And you can see I'm not putting a lot of force on this either. Alright, so I got it down pretty close here. Now I'm going to get the old wheel bearing, the outer race, and I'm going to use it to put right here on the outer lip of this, and it's going to help seat it all the way down in there. Alright, so I'm back with the old outer race from the old bearing, and so I can just put it right here, turn my hammer sideways like this, and I'm going to hit it like this. You can see I'm not hitting this with a ton of force, and it's seated there. I think it's enough right now to where I can get my snap ring in there. I'll probably give it another quick bump and then get my snap ring. So now I get my new snap ring pliers, squeeze the snap ring, make sure it's popped in the groove, which it is. You see here, the snap ring goes right in the groove perfectly. So now we're going to put the hub back on. Alright, for putting the hub in, technically you could go ahead and mount this spindle on the car right now, and then put the hub in with it already mounted on the car. The way I do it, since I don't have a press here in my shop, so what I do is I take and I put the axle through here. Well, I'm first going to bump this in a little bit with my hammer, and then I'm going to take the axle and I'm going to put it through here. Then I'm going to put the nut on it, and I'm going to tighten it down on my impact, and it's going to pull this hub all the way in. So I'm taking a little PB Blaster, just some kind of lubricant. I'm going to put on this just to kind of help aid it slide in. Put some grease on it, whatever. Alright. Also, while I'm doing this, I'm going to mention, do not hit this ring. This ring right here, your wheel seats around that. And if you mushroom it out, your wheel's not going to seat properly. So don't hit this ring. Hit inside of this. That's where you need to hit. As you can see, it's going down in there. I just had another axle So like I said, if you want to do this on the car, you could, and then just use the axle that's actually in the car. This is just another 32mm axle I had laying around. What we're going to do, like I said before, take this axle, shove it through. As you can see, it's not quite sticking through enough to get the nut started on it, so I'm going to hit it a couple more licks. Alright, so we can see here that I've got enough threads protruding now. I should be able to get this nut started. Now, I'll take my impact and let the impact do the work. It's spinning, that's fine. If you notice, the socket's spinning faster than this, so it's still tightening. You can hear the change in the tone there, so that means it's tight. As we can see here, it's pulled that axle all the way up in there. It's got the hub pulled down, good and tight. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this back off. Alright. I'm going to pull that axle back out. As we can see here, it's pulled it up nice and snug. It could probably stand to be tightened up just a little bit more, but I'll do that once it gets on the car. Here's our brake spindle. Alright, and then this one went to tie rod in. And we have the one for our ball joint, lower ball joint. I just finger tighten those because I'm going to use my impact to actually cinch them down. But that's got our upper one started, lower one started, and the tie rod in. And as you can see, our axle is stubbed through, so all I gotta do is get my axle nut and stick on that, and then when we tighten that down, tighten all the ball joints down. Alright, so I picked up my axle nut. Get it started on there. Use our 32mm again. Good and tight. Alright, and then we're going to take our hammer and our punch, and we're going to stake that nut to where it don't move if it does back off. So just our chisel and a hammer. There's a little groove cut in the axle. You'll see what I'm talking about. You just kind of put your punch right there. Done. And then we're going to tighten up these ball joints. So what I do is just hold down the upper control arm. And that'll kind of hold the ball joint down in the spindle where it don't spin. Then we can take our wrench. So do what we got. Use a little impact on the other ones. On these, you don't have to have them super tight. So what I do is I just snug them down, and then I go until the hole lines up. You see the hole in the castle nut here, and the hole in the thread. That's where your cotter pin's gonna go through. That one's good. And now we're gonna do the lower ball joint, which is here. All right, same deal with this one. It don't have to be super tight. Snug down. You can kind of see the hole in the thread is right behind this, so we're gonna keep bumping it until we get it around. I think we can get a cotter pin through that. I always put brand new cotter pins in. A lot of people reuse the old ones, but I have a stockpile of the new ones, and I just choose to put brand new ones in every time. So I'm gonna grab a couple of cotter pins real quick and put new ones in the lower ball joint, upper ball joint, and the tie rod in. So we can see here I got 3 new cotter pins. I used the 2 larger ones for the tie rod in and the lower ball joint, and the smaller one goes in the upper ball joint. It's just got a little bit smaller hole in the threads on it. This one's kind of flimsy. Just kind of do them like this. One back, one kind of up. All it's gonna do is keep that nut from coming off if it were to loosen. All right, now we're gonna take our ABS wiring. Gonna put the 10mm nut here, and then we're going to slide this back in the hole where it goes, like I showed you previously. The mounting tab on this one's broke, but I'm still gonna put it back in there. The nut back in this 10mm up here too. Just got that ABS wire done. On this brake rotor, like I mentioned before, it has those spots for the screws that hold the rotor onto the hub assembly. I don't have those screws, but we still have to make sure they line up with this, or at least I do. You don't have to since you aren't using them, but I like to make sure they line up. So you can see here, in the event that we had our screws, we could stick them in right there, and all it's going to do is just secure the rotor while you're assembling the brake system, but you can do it without it. So now we're going to take our brake caliper bracket with our two 17mm bolts, and we're going to put it back over that like so, and then we're going to put the bolts in it. Alright, now that we got our bracket back on, we're going to put the brake pads back in it. Alright, and then while we're at this point, I'm going to re-grease these sliders because they seem pretty stiff. These slider pins for the brake caliper are pretty dry, so I'm going to put some lube on them and then stick them back in there. So here I have both my pins. I'll slide them back in here. Make sure the little rubber boot seats up. Slide it back and forth a couple times. Alright, I'm gonna get my brake caliper. Slide it back up on there. Put my 12mm bolts back in here. Just get them started. So I just tightened down these with my 12mm wrench, and now I got to put these two 10mm bolts back in here. So all that's back assembled now, and now all I got to do is stick the wheel back on. Alright, so I got the wheel mounted back up, and as you can see, there's no more funny noises. It's just the rotor dragging there, but no top to bottom play. No side to side play. Good to go. So that's a wrap. Now I know that you can replace the wheel bearing on your Honda Accord right at home and in your garage. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please leave a like below. And as always, you could comment and let me know if it helped you and how it helped you. If you're new around here, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and check out some more of my DIY videos. And as always, I hope to see you on the next one. Peace.